Who's first? Who's second?
Second.
Your cleanup?
Yeah. We're doing alpha all the way. Giving this a little too much thought.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer, and I am proud to be the chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning for this important and for me, very personally momentous hearing. I want to recognize, first of all, we've been joined by Councilmember Darma Diaz. Thank you for joining us. And there are some other meetings going on right now, so other council members will be joining us. This is, if you can believe it, my 125th convening of this committee. I have chaired 100. We went back and actually looked at the record, and Jack, my legislative director, came back and said, to date, you've chaired 124 Cultural Affairs and Libraries hearings, so this is number 125, and of course my final as the chair. 12 years ago, I was honored to be appointed to chair this committee, and I remember the first hearing ever was with libraries, and that is why I wanted to end with libraries, although as a special treat, our Commissioner of Cultural Affairs is joining here as well to speak. It was in Chambers, and after having worked for the Queens Public Library for 11 years and having attended every meeting on the Committee on Cultural Affairs and Libraries as a staffer, to have stood in this position as the chair of the committee was a dream come true. And today we end this part of the journey. So it's very, very fitting that we're here together with the three presidents and CEOs of our three great library systems in the city of New York. Over the last 12 years, we've accomplished a lot of great things for our libraries. Particularly proud of the new libraries that have been constructed, all of the existing libraries that have been improved and renovated, and needless to say, the incredible levels of funding that we've been able to achieve on behalf of our three public libraries. They all deserve and need even more, and it will be up to the next mayor and the next speaker, the next chair of Cultural Affairs and Libraries, and the next council to make sure that you all have the resources that you need to do the great work. But I am proud. Not only did we do no harm, we leave it better than we found it. And that is incredibly important to me. A little over 1 year ago, we gathered virtually to hold an oversight hearing on our public libraries and the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm not surprised, of course, because I worked in this field for so long. But New Yorkers, I'm sure, continue to be amazed, impressed, and grateful by the staff and the teams at all of our public libraries who have, through their creativity and hard work and courage, reinvented public library service at a time when people were desperately isolated, and so incredibly grateful for everything that has been done. And to the three of you who were there at the moment when our public libraries had to close in those darkest of days. But it is also the three of you, your teams who are here today, and most importantly, the staff who then came together and went virtual, went online, started a pickup service, and ultimately a return to library service as we know it today. The pandemic only revealed what we know, which is that there is no New York City without our 3 public library systems. It is impossible to imagine community without your local public library. And I am thrilled that all of you will be here today to talk a little bit about where we are today, and also the work that we've done together. But thank you for what you do for the people of the City of New York. I also want to thank my staff, my Chief of Staff, Matt Wallace, who has been with me for 11 and a half of the 12 years. There he is over there. And Jack Bernadovitz, who's on the hearing remotely from Sunnyside, my legislative director, of course, Christy Dwyer, here, Alia Ali, and Brenda McKinney, who is taking care of 2 incredibly beautiful new arrivals in the world, and so can't be with us today personally, but the staff of the committee and the teams. So I'll say a few more words without getting too choked up later, but with that, I would invite all of you to begin your testimony.
This is indeed a momentous occasion. I'm Linda Johnson. I am the president and CEO of Brooklyn Public Library. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to testify, but mostly for the extraordinary work that, as you point out, has been accomplished during your tenure. I hope you noticed that at the outset when you announced that we had been doing this for as many years as we have, we all clapped, real claps, not just the finger click that you would normally get. So we're all, well, it's bittersweet. We're all thrilled to be here to be testifying this morning with you. You know, we are, of course, grateful for your unmatched library enthusiasm, and that's not hyperbole. I'm sure it's unmatched. And unflagging leadership and support over the course of the past 12 years. And so it's great to be back in person in chambers for our last meeting with you at the helm. 2 weeks ago, Brooklyn Public Library kicked off its 125th birthday. On November 30th, 1896, the Brooklyn Common Council passed a resolution to establish Brooklyn Public Library, and the first branch opened soon after in a former public school building. I've been thinking about how rare it is to create a legacy that has a meaningful impact on the lives of 4, 5, even 6 future generations, people we may never meet, whose realities we can't fully imagine. I'm convinced that your library legacy has had a profound impact on our city and will continue to touch the lives of New Yorkers for generations to come. From the beginning, you understood the democratic, versatile power of public libraries, and along the way, you have brought so many into that understanding. Thank you for so eloquently and persuasively advocating for our systems, for the 8 million New Yorkers we currently serve, and for generations to come. Since we testified last November, the way our libraries serve New Yorkers has changed dramatically. In the winter of 2020, Brooklyn Public Library was offering grab-and-go lobby service and producing thousands of virtual programs. In the spring and summer of 2021, we began to gradually reopen our branches for book browsing and computer use. With a partnership of the Department of Transportation, we also created outdoor library spaces where Brooklynites could read and use our free Wi-Fi, listen to multilingual story time, or reconnect with their neighbors. By this July, all 3 library systems had fully reopened our collective 217 branches to the public, with the exception of those under construction. In Brooklyn, we have already welcomed more than 900,000 patrons of all ages back to their neighborhood library to enjoy safe, clean, dignified space, browse our collection, use a computer or printer, and enlist the help of our librarians. We have reopened several refurbished library spaces, including Rugby, Windsor Terrace, and Cortelyou. Our newly renovated flagship Central Library has a new Welcome Center named after Brooklyn's own Librarian of Congress, Major Owens, a civic commons for community engagement, a new and noteworthy book gallery, and contemporary business and career center. We have also opened a first new branch in nearly 4 decades. The Adams Street Library serves the communities of Dumbo, Farragut, and Vinegar Hill, and serves as an accessible and inspiring mode for 21st century libraries. Throughout the borough, our dedicated staff have worked diligently and creatively to restore library services to our communities. In all of our branches, we have implemented safety guidelines in order to gradually restore in-person programming. Brooklyn Public Library librarians and staff have simultaneously continued to produce thousands of virtual programs, from English conversation groups to cooking classes to personalized resume help. Of course, we are keenly aware of the hundreds of thousands of Brooklynites without access to affordable broadband and have been doing everything in our power to bridge the digital divide, a divide which has only grown more extreme during the pandemic. When we realized, for example, that our adult basic education students could no longer attend virtual classes toward the end of the month when their cell phone data plans ran out, we teamed up with 2 organizations, No One Left Offline and Devices for Students, to lend mobile hotspots. No one should be barred from improving their reading skills because they can't afford broadband. The emergency broadband benefit, which the FCC implemented this spring, offers new subsidiaries to qualifying households, and the new federal infrastructure bill includes a permanent subsidy. This is meaningful progress toward digital equity, only if people successfully enroll in and receive the subsidies. So Brooklyn Public Librarians created a broadband benefit guide and are now helping patrons navigate the government application, a powerful example of how public libraries can connect New Yorkers to impactful benefits. To date, we have installed rooftop antennas at 50 branches, amplifying free, reliable Wi-Fi 300 feet in every direction. And at select outdoor library spaces, we offer laptop loans for patrons without devices to log on. Seeking to fully activate our outdoor spaces, we also created several outdoor exhibitions, including Brooklyn Resists at the new Center for Brooklyn History. In October 2020, Brooklyn Public Library merged with the former Brooklyn Historical Society to create Brooklyn's first research library and the largest archive of Brooklyn history in the world. Brooklyn Resists introduced patrons to the power of that collection with photographs, documents, and ephemera that tell the story of how generations of Black Brooklynites have risen up against racial injustice. Whether it's democratizing Brooklyn's archives or amplifying Wi-Fi from our rooftops, Brooklyn Public Library strives to remove barriers to access. That's why, with our partners in Queens and New York Public Libraries, we have permanently eliminated late fines this fall. Now, patrons are only charged for lost materials more than 4 weeks overdue, charges which are removed as soon as the materials are returned. In other words, as long as you return your books, you will always be able to check out more. No one will be prevented from using their library because of unpaid late fees. This is a major milestone in the history of our city's libraries. We have joined several urban library systems across the country in setting a new precedent, one informed by our ideals of access and equity. In the wake of the pandemic, Brooklyn Public Library is especially focused on ensuring our city rebuilds a more equitable economy. Our newly renovated Business and Career Center is offering finance and marketing workshops for small businesses, and our annual Power Up competition awarded seed money to aspiring entrepreneurs. This year, 70% of our Power Up participants had never before owned a business, 68% were women, and 56% were Black, and all are now better equipped to achieve their dreams and enrich their communities. If we are to foster equity in our community, we understand we must foster equity within our organization. This fall, Brooklyn Public Library launched a new scholarship program called Pathways to Leadership to support members of our staff from underrepresented groups who wish to earn their master's in library science. In addition to financial support, participants will receive mentorship and leadership training and will eventually have the opportunity to become librarians at Brooklyn Public Library. The program is designed to diversify the field of librarianship, which has long been dominated by white women. We're extremely excited for our inaugural class, who will matriculate this January. There is much to look forward to. Our libraries remain committed to helping the city and end the pandemic. Brooklyn Public Library has continued our partnership with the NYCC Test and Trace Corps. We helped older adult patrons make vaccine appointments and hosted vaccine information sessions with partners such as Brooklyn Methodist and the Caribbean Women's Health Association. We are partnering with the city to offer walk-in COVID vaccines to 5 to 11-year-olds at 5 of our branches, beginning with Coney Island and New Lots in the coming weeks. Even if we all manage to vaccinate every last eligible New Yorker, we know our city still faces unprecedented challenges. Learning loss, high unemployment, and extreme economic inequity. The effects of social isolation and trauma. But libraries are not powerless in the face of these challenges. We have long known how to support students and job seekers, how to create more equitable and more cohesive communities. With the renewed support of this committee and the incoming City Council and administration, we know that public libraries can help our city rebuild. No other institution interacts with every neighborhood on a human scale. No other institution is trusted by teens, immigrants, and older adults alike, and offer versatile services to them all. We're grateful to the committee and to the entire City Council for recognizing that and consistently championing public libraries as one of our city's most important assets and allies. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's an honor to be here. It's a pleasure to be here in person with everyone, and with you especially. I'll come back to that before we're done. But thanks to the entire committee and all the members of the City Council for their extraordinary work and under extraordinary circumstances, and for their extraordinary support of the library system on behalf of the citizens of New York. So I will summarize rather than read the testimony, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman. You have the testimony. As with Linda and Dennis, Brooklyn and Queens, amazing systems, we have maintained our commitments to the citizens of New York through this difficult period. We pivoted instantly, because we could and we had to digital platforms, remote offerings, and partnerships with the city through the pandemic. We closed our branches right away, if not in advance of some. Back in March 20, by 3 months later, we had branches open, as Linda described, for grab and go, as well as our online opportunities and offerings, which exploded. For instance, ebooks, we had a circulation of 10 million lens since March 2020. So a new world, well-timed, and of course the circumstances pushed us ahead. As well, not just ebooks, but Tech Connect classes, one-on-one career counseling, brain-fused tutoring, all of that. And on the research library, over 800,000 pages of archives scanned on demand and sent together with doubling the size of the research collection available to all New Yorkers very quietly by making public the collections of Harvard, Columbia, and Princeton for the first time in history. We expanded our databases, our research books, as with our partners, and academic ebooks. We focused vital resources on health and wellness, food security, and housing and tenant rights, all obviously essential issues for which New Yorkers need and deserve their information from a trusted source, which is why they come to the library. The pandemic also saw some milestones that we've been working on together in partnership. Obviously, the opening of our Central Branch Library, the Niarchos Foundation Library, with huge thanks to the city for its partnership to make that possible. We also opened our Treasures exhibit in the main building. So 125 years later, we have amazing, amazing collections that mostly sat in a safe and nobody got to see them. We're now keeping them safe, but making them available for everyone in the public to see, and we're super excited about that. We've had close to 60,000 visitors, despite the pandemic, in the first 2 months or 3 months in which Treasures have been open. Let's see, as I said, we had grab and go. We restored full service back in July 21 at all locations, as well as expanding through bookmobile, outreach into the communities. We, of course, came out of the pandemic understanding that the rifts in New York society, the lack of security for people who are doing essential work but do not have security of jobs, of housing, of health, of education, which are essentials, that we needed to double down because those communities had been explicitly hit by the pandemic in ways that the wealthy communities simply have not. And so, really for the first time in our history, we've said, we're not going to reduce our investment across the system, but we're going to invest additional resources in the neighborhoods of the greatest need. And we have some of the poorest neighborhoods, in fact, legally the poorest neighborhoods in the country within our 3 boroughs. So whether that's summer reading or whatever we can do, and as Linda said, the late fines, eliminating of late fines was a pretty clear statement of that values, but that's just part of what we need to do to get people back in and get people using the library who haven't been using the library. That is an essential issue at this point. We have moved forward with our capital agenda, grateful to you and for the city for making that possible. We have seen renovations in Carnegie branches like Melrose, Fort Washington, 125th Street, Hunts Point, Port Richmond. Our new Inwood Library, the neighborhood I grew up in, has broken ground, and it will be bigger, better, connected to a community center, a STEM center, various community activities, and have 177 100% affordable housing units above it. And that, I think, is an important precedent for how libraries can use space on top of it. I know my colleagues have been creative in those ways as well. We're seeing the completion of New Amsterdam, Bloomingdale, and Roosevelt Island earlier this year. We're continuing the construction for a brand new Charleston branch. And we hope to get to much more, Stapleton, Washington Heights, Van Cortlandt. And a big shout out here to Iris Weinschel behind me and her team for really extraordinary capital work and working with you all in partnership. We've retained our focus on civic engagement, whether it's supporting national voting and local census efforts, voter engagement initiatives. We've collaborated with the city, as Brooklyn and Queens have also, whether it's COVID testing sites, cooling centers, learning labs. And we know that there are major challenges ahead. We need to reconnect with people in person, which we are doing. But we also need to reach to people who are not using us. We are the most used, most trusted, most respected, and yet we know in the poorest neighborhoods, people are still not borrowing as many books as in the middle-class neighborhoods. We have to get at that. So we know that. We know we can't reduce our digital investment. That is clearly an important part of the future, and we are on it. I'll just say this creates a challenge. We are, all of us, trying to do more with additional support. Again, huge thanks to you, but just think about it. We're running larger physical, offerings. We've massively increased our educational programs. And the budget has increased. But we're also running a digital library in many ways, not just for New York, but for the world, because New York is the leader of the world. We must. And we're trying to add additional resources to target the poorer neighborhoods. That's like trying to do 2.5 or 3 things on one budget. And the truth is, that's what my colleagues are doing. And it is an extraordinary accomplishment. We will continue, we must continue, but we can only do that with your help. Let me conclude by saying, in the end, for all these accomplishments, the buildings, the programs, the books, it all comes down to people. It comes down to the amazing colleagues that I work with, many of whom are here. It comes down to the staff of the libraries who are there every day, even at risk, to meet the needs of the community to learn. What could be more powerful than that? It depends on donors, but it depends essentially on the partnership with the city. This is a unique public-private partnership that has created the most trusted civic institutions in town, the most used, with a balance of public and private support that has gotten us to new heights, though there are challenges ahead. That only works because of you understanding what we do and how central it is, even if it isn't always as flashy as other things that might happen. It's the steady, powerful force, foundational force. And again, that is only possible because of this partnership, and this partnership is only possible because of your leadership. And today, I just want to say, in particular, during this decade, my experience here, Jimmy, your partnership, your passion, your commitment, your persistence, and your delivery has made a difference for the lives of millions of people who rely on these libraries, in addition to everything else you've done. And that is an amazing accomplishment for which everyone is incredibly grateful. Thank you.
First, let me say good morning to all of you, council members, a pleasure, chair, and to all the hardworking team members that are part of the chair's staff. Thank you for your constant support and your leadership. I will not really go into my testimony because Linda and Tony really captured a lot of what we did as a team. But I will start by saying my first contact with the chair is prior to his role as a city council member. It was at the St. Albans Library, where the chair was then working for the Queens Public Library, and he was with the Friends of the St. Albans Library, and in particular, Rita Robinson, and a variety of people there, her sister. And it was the first time I really got a chance to see his advocacy about libraries and the importance of libraries. And St. Albans, for those who may not know, while not that particular building, is my home library when I was growing up as a child. So there's a nice symmetry to see the chair there in his Queens Public Library hat, and that relationship has continued over the years. So before I go into any type of testimony that I'll read, I want to personally say thank you for everything that you've done over the years. It has been a commitment both of the public side of your life and the city council side, but even prior to that, in your overall commitment as an individual human being in the commitment to what libraries represent to all people that Linda and Tony have talked about. So like my colleagues, we shut down and then we reopened through our virtual world. And our team at the Queens Public Library did a masterful job, just like the teams at Brooklyn and New York as well. And I really want to thank them and our trustees for their leadership and allowing us to really reach that point of serving the public virtually. As you know, Queens was the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak, Elmhurst in particular, but throughout the borough, and our libraries responded in kind. We set up our virtual world rather quickly, and as a matter of fact, a number of the programs that we put in place, they were really transferred to the virtual world in a way that even outpaced at times some of the on-site, on-ground programs. At Queens, we started and had a 24-hour Black Health Summit, and it was a huge success. And I'm not sure if I had said this before at a hearing, but the crazy person that I am, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the insomnia session on why the heck I should be up at 3 o'clock watching it. But we wanted to really reach into the community. And the beauty of this particular summit, it reached beyond the borough of Queens. It was able to reach people nationally, and we even had some folks from South Africa looking in. So our Black Health and Healing Virtual Summit really was something that addressed the mental health, health equity, parenting, civil rights, and racism, and disproportionate effects of the virus on different communities. Over 7,000 people viewed the event on a live basis or in real time, with many more viewing it when the recordings became available as well. Our Stacks After School program, we shifted that into a virtual world as well, and then that was able to grow and operate 13 enrichment sites, 11 homework centers through our library network, and staff was able to modify the program to fit a virtual model, offering STEM workshops, art projects, and more children in kindergartens through 5th grade receiving the services. For our adult learners, we transitioned classes for our customers to take remotely, such as our basic education high school equivalency, our citizenship classes, as well as our case management sessions as well. In fiscal year 2020, our adult learning program hosted more than 760 sessions, totaling 2,700 instructional hours, with an attendance of nearly 8,000, all in a virtual setting. Since implementing the virtual program, we have hosted over 25,600 virtual programs, and with 423,000 live attendees. Our archived virtual programs have over 1 million views, as those who could not tune in live watch the content when their schedules permitted. We added over 86,000 items to our digital collections in order to meet the demand of our customers in the virtual world. And from July of 2020 to June of 2021, we circulated over 1.4 million ebooks and e-magazines, a more than 68% increase when compared to the same period from the previous year. As we continue moving forward towards our full pre-pandemic operations, Queens Public Library will continue to offer a hybrid of in-person and virtual program, as well as continue to enhance our e-content and digital resources to ensure our customers can safely secure what they need in our branches via the digital platforms. The pandemic has highlighted, as indicated by both Linda and Tony, the inequities in our society. Inequities that we knew about, but now that's even more pronounced as a result of the pandemic. And what we've seen is the issue, as Linda talked about, and what Brooklyn and New York have done so well, is how we increase our broadband access to make sure we reach the public as well. In Queens, we've done some of the same, and also we've examined what some of the needs are of the public and try to work in partnership with others to make sure we expand our broadband reach. Working to narrow the digital divide, Queens Public Library loaned 475 mobile hotspots to students in 2020 through our ongoing collaboration with the New York City Department of Education. In October, we announced an initiative funded by Sterling National Bank, National Grid, and the Thomas and Jean Elmezi Private Foundation to provide over 250 hotspots and laptops to loan to the public, specifically at Lafayette City, South Jamaica, Astoria, and Long Island City libraries. All of our locations provide free Wi-Fi access to individuals even when our buildings are closed, and in 20 locations, we currently have enhanced Wi-Fi capabilities where the signal is available up to 150 yards beyond our physical walls. From July 2020 through June 21, over 500,000 New Yorkers accessed Queens Public Library's Wi-Fi network, an 11% increase from the same period the previous year. In response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many other black people, and the national reckoning around race and systemic racism in our society, we established a working group at the library called the President's Council on Racial Equity. In the beginning, we had 55 of our members from staff from a variety of different departments who've been involved in it. We've divided up into subcommittees with steering committee. We were able to receive a grant to support it as well. And the mission of PCRE is to identify racial barriers in policy, procedure, practice, and history that may have a negative impact on Black employees and customers, and to identify solutions to create a more equitable workplace. PCRE members, who total over 50 dedicated employees, are reviewing QPL's recruiting, hiring, and promotion practices, its culture, its learning and growth opportunities, governance, programs, services, collections, and other opportunities on rectifying issues of racial inequity, and taking a look at outreach and marketing strategies which will culminate in a comprehensive plan for lasting change at our institution. Throughout the pandemic, we collaborated with the New York State and New York City on a variety of initiatives. Our Lefferts, Kew Gardens Hills, and Windsor Park branches served as COVID-19 testing sites. Our Flushing branch served as a vaccination site, and our Ozone Park branch continues to serve as a vaccination site. Additionally, QPL has hosted many mobile testing, vaccination pop-up events at our libraries, including one just last week at our East Elmhurst branch. Moreover, we are collaborating with the city to assist in the effort to vaccinate as many children as possible, age 5 through 11, and 13 of our sites served as polling locations, similar to my colleagues as well. I'm not going to read the rest of the testimony, but I do want to concentrate on a couple of things that Tony and Linda both said. One, we are there for the city, plain and simple. We're there in so many different ways. And in addition to the shout out to Iris and the Capitol people at Linda's shop and what they've done, our team at QPL continues to expand as well capitally. New branches are opening, renovated branches are being addressed, and as a result of the additional money from the city council, the executive side, we continue to make sure we improve it. But what we're seeing is that a balancing act is taking place right now, where a lot of our Lindsay boxes, which was 7,500 square feet, are now being moved to roughly 13,000, 18,000 square feet. And that puts a pressure on us that we've never experienced before. Because it's nice to say, oh, we're expanding from 7,500 to 15,000, 18,000, but it requires staffing to do that as well. So that's part of the balancing act, as well as what Tony indicated in his testimony, addressing the issue of the virtual world with the real world and making sure we have on-site services. And we're doing all that as well as meeting the needs of today's society. We are there for the public, and as a result, your leadership chair, the members of the committee, as well as the speaker and the mayor's office, we continue to expand. But that expansion and the support will only be successful if we have that ongoing support from the city. So I want to take this opportunity to personally thank you for everything that you have done in helping us transform our libraries into modern-day facilities that continue to serve the public's needs. And we are there to serve the city, to respond to the city, address the emergency needs of the city, but it also requires us to have the ongoing support of the city. Mr. Chair, thank you for your leadership over the years. We truly appreciate it. And I think we want to do something, right, before any question and answers take place. So hold on one second. Let security know we're not storming the front of the... We're not storming the front. Yeah. Yeah, well, I just want security.
You wanted a picture, you can go right here. You want a picture? Hey, here.
We just want to say a big thank you for everything that you've done. Better than my colleagues.
So, first of all, let me say thank you very much. I was not prepared for that. Did not know that was coming. Thank you very much, Councilmember Diaz. So just a few thoughts, and I see Commissioner Casals has joined us. You know where I'm coming from, and I am of you and the people behind you. No institution does more to address the issues of equity and access and inclusion that everyone is rightfully talking about. And libraries always say yes, right? They always say yes to the folks that we serve, the communities, but you also always say yes to the city of New York, right? When the city of New York says, we need your help to do this, whether it's IDNYC, right? Whether it's testing, whether it's vaccination in the middle of a pandemic. Dennis knows well that I got tested several times at Queens Library facilities, and then just by chance I was assigned to get my first 2 vaccine shots at the Flushing Library, and it was just so perfect that I would go to the Flushing Library to get my first 2 shots. And you always are there. You always say yes. And so the city of New York always needs to say to you, what more could we be doing to allow you to reach even more people, to do the work that you do? We know how important you are because we always come to you in times of need. We always rely and lean on our public library systems to do more. And you always say yes. You always come through for the city of New York. So I'm really proud that we did our part. You know that when I was on the budget negotiating team and libraries came up, when we were meeting in this room or downstairs, all the members would turn to me and say, okay, what is Jimmy going to say about libraries? And I fought, and sometimes like an animal, to make sure that libraries were protected. So it's been a great privilege and honor. When I first walked into that chamber, working for the Queens Library, the late Reverend and Councilmember Wendell Foster was the chair of this committee. It then also included parks, if you could believe it or not. It was cultural affairs, libraries, parks, and international intergroup relations. And I drafted these testimonies for 11 years. So I want the staff to know that I read them. I absolutely read the work that's done. And of course, the 3 of you were not there at that time. Martine Gomez was the president of Brooklyn Public Library, Gary Strong, of course, at Queens, and Paul LeClaire at NYPL. But each of you have, in your own ways, transformed the public library systems that you now lead. And I'm so grateful to all of you. I think, Tony, you're a great leader. I've enjoyed your testimony. I'm sure that George has a hard time sometimes getting you to say what's exactly on the piece of paper in front of you. But you're eloquent when talking about this. It's so passionate and so passion-driven. And, Linda, you've brought a stability and a real strength to the Brooklyn Public Library, that was not always there. And we often were very proud of how our Queens delegation would come through when I both worked at the Queens Library and then, of course, here. And you all have built a great deal of strength in Brooklyn, so that there is that kind of support from your own home borough. And I think that's really an incredible testament to your leadership and obviously your team as well. And Dennis, I want to say, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when your appointment was announced, A former Queens Council member came to me, and said, thank God, because now we have a president and CEO that is worthy of the institution, right? Someone who is prominent, someone who is accomplished, someone who is so respected. And Queens Public Library, and its staff and its people always deserved that. So thank you very much. I don't know if you have anything to say, Councilmember Diaz, but I'm about to cry, so please say something.
You mentioned Dennis Walcott. In my humble beginnings as a PTA parent, education advocate, we crossed paths many times. So it's definitely, as the chair stated, it was great to see you elevated to where you are today. As a parent back then, I knew that our system was in a much better place. We had an educator, someone that brought to the table what was much needed within the system. To the rest of you, thank you. Thank you for what you've done throughout the pandemic. My local library, Arlington Library, the 37th, definitely felt the love and the encouragement from staff. It was a pleasure to see staff in the local park trying to outreach to parents and be that community partner that we definitely needed, especially, as it was stated earlier, in communities like mine that don't know the library to be a safe haven and do not often engage in the library. So thank you also for seeking this opportunity to engage, again, communities like mine that are not used to coming to the library, whether it's to get a book or immigration conversation and advocacy. So thank you. Thank you for your service. And many of us don't know in New York City how lucky we are to have people such as yourselves at the top. Thank you. Thank you for all your service.
You just saved my life. Thank you, Councilmember Diaz. Thank you for those words. And I know that our Cultural Affairs Commissioner, Gonzalo Casals, is here. Folks should know, and I think the three president CEOs appreciate this, Commissioner Casals was appointed the commissioner just as COVID hit, and he has never testified as the commissioner inside City Hall. Oh. So it was particularly important to me to invite the commissioner here today so he would have the experience, at least once, of testifying inside City Hall as a citywide commissioner. So we're grateful to be able to do that. While this is ostensibly about libraries, of course, the convergence and the synergies between libraries, culture, the arts, and programming is deep. It's one of the things I've loved about chairing this committee so much. I will just say that when I became chair of this committee, and this is what I asked for when Christine Quinn was the speaker, and I'd just been elected, and she said, what would you like to chair? And I said, the only thing I'm asking for is to be chair of Cultural Affairs and Libraries. She said, that's a very popular committee. There are a lot of folks who would like it. And I said, I know that, but I still want it. and I got it. And when I did, because I had worked at the Queens Public Library for 11 years, I felt like I needed to also signal to the Cultural Affairs part of the committee and the cultural sector that I'm going to fight for you and love you just as much as I love libraries. And I think we have done that. But I will always be a library person. So thank you all very, very much for being here.
I like to figure out how do you engage low-performing communities. You use the word poor, which is not my vocabulary. Because poor is a negative tone. No,
I'm just trying to be like, let's be honest.
no, not on you. Not only my pastor who rest in peace taught us it's a mindset. So if you think you're poor, you act poor. My daughter's 33. At 28, she realized that she was poor growing up. And why? Because right, and
She had New York.
we were poor. I have been on public assistance.
What words did I use?
Local,
Under-resourced?
under-resourced, lacking resource, but not on you. It's not you. It's just.
Thank you.
Oh, you don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it's just the last. Just let them know that I was leaving. I have to go back to deal with that.
Thank you so much. I
You're
hope
welcome.
everyone's safe.
Me too.
You fill out a witness slip?
All right. As we say goodbye to our 3 public library systems, we are going to move forward with the aforementioned Commissioner of Cultural Affairs for the City of New York, Gonzalo Casals, and I believe Deputy Commissioner Feinberg is also joining us for this portion of the testimony. And I think we'll start with the formalities and pass it over to Christy Dwyer for the oath of office.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Would you raise your right hand, please, while I administer the oath? To Deputy Commissioner Sheila Feinberg and Commissioner Gonzalo Casals from the Department of Cultural Affairs. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you so much. You may begin when ready.
Thank you. First, let me just say a couple of words. As I mentioned before, when I first became the chair of this committee, our cultural sector invited me to a gathering at the Public Theater, and I felt it was very important at that meeting to remind everyone that I would take the cultural affairs portion of my title just as seriously as the libraries, and I believe we have done that to an extremely successful degree. And Commissioner Casals, your tenure here has been under the most challenging of circumstances, but you have made a difference in this city under very trying circumstances, and we have had you testify from your apartment in Jackson Heights many times, but I felt it only appropriate and very meaningful, because you have been the commissioner. You've done great work, you've made a big difference, but this building is very significant in many ways, and very important that you have the opportunity to testify at least once here in this building, and particularly with myself chairing the committee. So thank you, and with that, I'll ask you to begin your testimony.
Before I start my testimony, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I want to thank you for your leadership, your partnership, and your friendship throughout, not only these 22 months that I was commissioner, but, throughout all the advocacy years in which you were helping us, make a case for arts and culture. And without getting too personal, almost 2 years ago, when I got sick of COVID and I was in the hospital, the nurses were making sure that they were double masked, they were wearing goggles, and every time they would engage us, they would make sure that they knew that they were smiling behind their mask, right, just to give us some comfort. Just want to make sure you know that I'm smiling behind this mask because of how meaningful this moment is for me, so thank you. Good morning, Chair Van Bremer and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Having only been able to present testimony virtually up until now, much like cultural programming, there's no substitute for the live experience, so I'm very excited to be here. While the past 2 years have in many ways felt like an eternity, I want to begin my update on the cultural community's COVID recovery by looking back even farther at the beginning of this administration. Much of the groundwork for our collective response to the pandemic was laid during this time, both within the agency and throughout the cultural sector. When my predecessor, Tom Finkerpel, joined with hundreds of cultural leaders at the Ford Foundation in 2015 to launch our agency's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, let's be honest, it caused a lot of anxiety. While many advocates have been calling for greater racial equity, demographic diversity, and inclusive practice for generations, many more people were uncomfortable speaking about these issues. In part, this came from a lack of understanding of how we could address the profound systemic problems we face. But to fix a problem, you need to understand it and to talk openly about solutions. At that time, I was still working at one of the nonprofits represented in that room, and the agency's work is one of the factors that propel the systemic shift in the tone and attitude toward DEI work that we have seen around us. When Black Lives Matter movement gained mainstream momentum last year, New York's cultural community was better prepared to understand where the anguish and calls for change were coming from and to respond meaningfully. While these conversations reverberated through the cultural community, here at the agency we launched new programs to address the problems. We started with landmark studies that back up with data what so many of us already observed. The cultural workforce was far less diverse than the city itself. So with programs like the CUNY Cultural Course, the Leadership Accelerator, and new funding for diversity programs across the sector, DCLA made this work a top priority for the agency in the early years of the administration. As we've come to see, we were also laying the foundations for greater equity in our funding and ultimately a pandemic response that focused on getting relief funds to the hardest hit communities. Then came the Create NYC cultural problem. That's a sleep there. Then came the Create NYC cultural plan. Thanks to the legislation sponsored by you, Chair Van Bremer, and your colleagues, the agency embarked on the tremendous task of developing New York's first ever comprehensive cultural plan strategy. At the time, I worked as a consultant for the plan, and I saw firsthand the amazing energy residents brought to the public engagement process across the city. Following months of intensive public input, the plan released in 2017, built on equity work, started in the preceding years and laid out a vision for where it would go next. While DCLA is so much more than a funder providing financial support to culture organizations, it is one of our core functions. As a result, many of our efforts to foster equity focus on greater equity in funding. For the members of the Cultural Institutions Group, Create NYC resulted in a requirement for them to adopt DEI plans, among the first anywhere in the country for the cultural sector. We also work a deal with the Met Museum where funds raised through a mandatory admission fee for non-New Yorkers was reinvested in small groups in more underserved areas around the city. These investments drew on the work of the Social Impact for the Arts, whose research found a powerful correlation between cultural assets in public health, education, and safety. Based on these findings, we continue to increase investment steadily in systematically oppressed communities, a strategy we come to build in the wake of COVID-19 with its disproportionate impacts on communities of color. After the release of Create NYC, we also redirected investments and launched new funds intended to focus on particular areas of need in our sector. This included the Mayor's Grant for Cultural Impact, which supported collaborations between art groups and city agencies. The Disability Forward Fund expanded opportunities for disability access and artistry. The Language Access Fund opened new pathways for non-English speakers to connect with our cultural sector. These funds joined the City Council's growing number of cultural initiatives, likewise supporting underserved segments of the population. These include the Cultural Immigrant Initiative, the Coalition of Theater of Colors, the Cultural After School Adventures Program, and Sukasa. Together, the administration and City Council grew city funding for the arts to record levels, with major emphasis on increasing investments in New Yorkers most often excluded from cultural opportunities and engagement. The cultural plan also helped establish something that would become a critical component of the cultural community's response to COVID-19, a sense of solidarity. Culture at 3, a sector-led initiative that's still going strong, the Museum Reopening Task Force, and many other collective efforts emerged as an essential source of mutual aid and resource sharing. Excuse me. As cultural administrations, we tend to group ourselves together by discipline, by size, by location, by audience, all for understandable reasons. But the truly cross-sector collaboration that emerged in spring 2020 showed that we have more to gain from working together than we do from fighting for sources alone. Of all the terrible things that happened in the last 2 years, this is one bright spot that I hope we can continue to build on. In March 2020, we have learned very quickly just how fragile our communities could be. My appointment as commissioner was announced the very same week that all of New York was shut down. On a weekly group call with my fellow museum leaders, a call that would eventually be absorbed into Culture at 3, we thought that reopening might just be days away. As we know now, it would be many months before cultural reopenings would begin in earnest. Successive surveys conducted by DCLA of our constituents showed how profound the damage was, from $1 billion in lost revenue to risk of permanent closure to layoffs and furloughs that affected arts educations and organizations of color far more than their larger, wealthier counterparts. The damage to our cultural community has been widespread and massive. As I mentioned, cultural groups found support in their collective solidarity. Private philanthropy did what they could to stop the hemorrhaging. And the cultural affairs, we learn on everything we learn, And at cultural affairs, we lean on everything that we have learned about investing in and uplifting and historically marginalized communities through the arts to rush support where it was needed the most. In last year's budget, we set aside over $12 million for COVID relief and made more targeted investments based on our survey data, such as replenish a relief fund for the hard-hit arts educator community. The role culture has played in the last 2 years goes far beyond economic recovery. For example, our public artist in residency pair with the Commission of Human Rights, Amanda Pingo-Dubakia, created I Still Believe in Our City in the fall of 2020. As incidents of anti-Asian bias were on the rise here and across the country, this powerful public art campaign reminded our Asian Pacific Islander neighbors that they were here for them and called on all New Yorkers to stand in solidarity with our Asian communities. Our public artist in residency with the Civic Engagement Commission, Yasmani Arboleda, led the transformation of a decommissioned corrections bus into a community center on wheels called the People's Bus. It anchored a citywide festival this past summer and continues to drive civic engagement at events around the city. At a time when New Yorkers are suffering from isolation associated with the lockdown, the artist-led effort helped repair our civic fabric and reconnect residents socially and has resonated powerfully. Public Artists in Residency, which DCLA created in 2015, is another example of laying the groundwork for cultural connections and relationships that could be relied in and in a moment of crisis. It can be a major challenge to start something totally new under the best circumstances. So deal with this work thoughtfully and deliberately, and over time, is work that pays dividends when you need to respond quickly to new challenges like those created by the pandemic. Fencing back to this long-term effort to foster a greater understanding of the essential role artists play in the life of New York City, we're able to work with the mayor to create the City Artist Corps this year. This $25 million program funded by the federal relief money shows just how far we have come in helping our civic partners understand the power of artists have to heal and to bring people together. Starting this summer, thousands of artists received an infusion of much-needed money, helping make sure they could stay in New York and help drive out recovery. At the same time, it filled our open spaces, classrooms, galleries, and other spaces with the creative energy we all miss so dearly, which is a critical ingredient for healthy communities. Between these programs and the broader reopening to our collective commitment to public health has permitted, we have been overjoyed to see the return of creative programming to New York City. It has been very important both as a potent symbol of recovery and a very real return to our immense value that culture brings to our communities. The city has worked to support these reopening efforts. For example, our partners in the mayor's office created programs like Curtains Up in New York City to help groups navigate the federal and state relief funds available for them. And at DCLA, our staff worked tirelessly to process changes to grant applications to make sure the city dollars could continue to flow to the cultural community. Starting March of this year, Open Culture New York City, created through the legislation sponsored by Chair Van Bremer, thank you for that, was another bright spot for our cultural community. Hundreds of events were permitted since the program began. Alongside other programs that have brought city streets to life, with dining and performances, Open Culture gave New Yorkers the chance to engage with arts programming in their neighborhoods. It also gave artists and arts groups the opportunity to earn much-needed revenue. As the administration draws to a close, we're committed to building on and expanding the work during the pandemic. Just last week, DCLA announced a record high of $51.4 million in grants for more than 1,000 cultural groups distributed from the Cultural Development Fund. Again, we set aside funding for areas of the city hardest hit by the pandemic and for members of the cultural community who were most affected. Like arts educators, working with council to adopt our largest ever budget this year means we were also in a position to include relief funding for all CDF baseline grantees. Importantly, far from putting it on hold, DCLA staff have used the crisis as an opportunity to advance our ongoing work for fostering greater equity within the sector. For instance, we have expanded multi-year funding to all CDF grantees, something previously only available for larger groups. We're weaving DE further into our funding application review process, and we'll be rolling out additional reforms to our funding process to reduce barriers and enhance equity in the months ahead. How we have been able to rely on our equity work to respond to the pandemic shows to me that together we have been on the right path. While we have come so far and struggled so much, there's much more work to do. Thanks again to the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Casals. And, you know, when you talk about March of 2020 in your testimony, it's very powerful, both because of what you were experiencing on a personal level and what all of us were experiencing. And you know, culture, our sector, was just devastated. Many others were as well, but few devastated in the way that culture and the arts were. And the fact that we are far from recovered, but as strong as we are, is in no small part due to your leadership and your serving as commissioner during this time. I think there are few who have the trust that you do in the sector, and I think that that's been really important. I do think you've been able to get some things out of this administration that maybe others might not have been able to because of your tenacity and your skills and your passion, right? And so I'm just really grateful that you've been our commissioner for these last 22 months, and I know that whatever comes next, you will be still that trusted partner to our sector and to artists everywhere. So I did have just a couple of questions. What have you enjoyed the most about being commissioner? Because you have had a tenure unlike, I hope, any other commissioner has, right? I mean, so I hope that there have been moments of joy for you as you were doing this work, you know, oftentimes remotely during a pandemic, that it has just not been easy.
You know, as you asked me that question, I'm thinking, you know, February 2020, when you and I were standing up at the 7th train station in Jackson Heights one evening, collecting signatures, you know, for your nomination. And I was like, should I be doing this or not? You know, I feel like everything has done. There's nothing more to be done. And you were like, are you crazy? You should just go ahead and do it. So thank you for that vote of confidence without even knowing what was coming next. I've been saying that I would not want to be doing anything else in a moment like this for our city, for our sector, than this job. For an immigrant that came almost 20 years ago to this city, and that the cultural sector not only gave me my job, my career, my networks, my friends, my life, it was an incredible opportunity for me to be able to give back in a way, you know, for everything that I received from all of you. It was also a tremendous opportunity to be able to do this job in a moment that we all came together. I seriously thank you for the partnership that we were able to create. Well, it was very clear that we were doing the work from our own roles. We all, with the sector, with you, with the administration, we all understood what was the priority, what was needed, and we're all working together towards that. And I appreciate that a lot. And I'm very thankful that the meaning that an immigrant can be the Commissioner of Arts and Culture of New York City. If you just take a minute to think about how meaningful is that, right? On the heels of the legislation that you passed last week about non-residents being able to participate in democracy. This is very meaningful for the immigrant community, and we thank you for that.
Absolutely, and I have served in this position with 3 different commissioners. Obviously, when I came in as a brand new council member and chair, Kate Levin was our commissioner, and of course was very well established, at that point. But we worked well together and did some great things. And then, of course, I too was one of those who encouraged Tom Finkelpearl to become the commissioner, and we worked very closely together. And so I also encouraged you to accept the position, and I hope both you and Tom are not upset with me for encouraging you to take the positions. But you and I have worked very closely together, and it's been a real joy. Not just because we are friends and care about the sector, but because of how meaningful the conversations are. And I think there are a few people in our community that just have that universal respect and admiration and trust, right? Which is a very rare word that we use in government and politics. But people trust you. They know where you're coming from. They know you're not just talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. You're not just mouthing the words, that's actually your value system and structure, and that your life and work has been committed to that. So indeed, you've been the right person at the right time, because we all needed someone that genuine to be in this position at this moment. So I'm just very grateful that you got this opportunity to be the commissioner. I don't often agree with the mayor, but I agree with him wholeheartedly on this one. It was a great choice that he made, to his credit, and you've been a great commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs. So with that, I just want to say...
Chair, I feel like it's important to acknowledge that there's only so much one can do from this position if there's no people outside putting pressure and making us do the work. And again, I want to highlight your leadership in bringing the sector together, behind the right agenda. So when the administration, when the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs needs to make a decision, again, the agenda, the goal, what needs to be done is very clear, and the voice of the sector is very clear. So I'll thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I you just reminded me of something when I voted against the budget 2 Junes ago, and there was a massive group of folks assembled outside this building, and oftentimes people in powerful positions in government and politics sort of resent the pressure that's being applied to us by activists, and I luckily began as an activist and someone who did lots of civil disobedience and got arrested. And in my speech that night, I talked about ACT UP and how ACT UP was oftentimes not convenient, sometimes not polite, because people were dying, and they were forcing and compelling elected officials to be held accountable. And so I always have welcomed that, right? That is the role of activists, organizers, members of the community, members of the sector, right, is to push us. And so I think we share that too, which is a healthy respect for the folks that we are accountable to in this work while we are in these positions, instead of being resentful of those who are continuously pushing us to do more. So thank you again to your team. I appreciate the ability to do this with you today, and I want to thank again Christy Dwyer, Alia Ali, Brenda, who is once again taking care of two adorable little ones, Matt Wallace, my chief of staff, Jack Bernadovitz, who's watching, and Sunnyside. And with that, I will gavel out for the very last time as the chair of Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations, the longest name of any committee in the New York City Council. Thank you all very much. With it, this hearing is adjourned.